Try it now.
All right, perfect. Yay! Just went backwards again. There we go. So what does the accommodation process look like? Number one, when a student does submit an accommodation request, we do ask that they've already registered for the exam. Okay, well, that's an important piece because once the accommodation is fulfilled or approved, we need to apply the accommodation approval to an account or file. Okay. So they would submit the accommodation request. It is on a digital form, and we'll take a look at that in future slides. And then the next piece is for our PSI team to actually review the request. The next piece is once the accommodation has been approved, we will notify the student through that ticket or submission. And then also, if there's any type of information, documentation that is missing, we will alert the students. Most of the time, the students are not the ones who are actually submitting the requests. Sometimes those requests do come from an advocate or an instructor or even a parent that's assisting with scheduling the exam. Step 4 is to contact the PSI accommodations team to schedule. This is a really important step, and the reason why is we discourage test takers from self-scheduling because you will run the risk of not fulfilling the accommodation as is. Especially when they have extended time on top of a reader, on top of a private room. We want to ensure that the team handles those types of fulfillments because we have to coordinate with sites and other vendors to ensure their accommodation is taken care of and completed.
Can I stop you right there? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
So if a student gets accommodations approved and it's a site that has never done them, so what I'm hearing you say is that you will work with that site to make sure they're all ready.
And then step 5, will, like I said, the accommodations team will fulfill all the approvals. Step 6,
Can you check and see if can you flip and see if the microphone needs a switch up? We're having.
okay.
Oh, look at that. Okay. Sorry, we're in such an intimate space. It just seemed like, normal for us to just talk where we're. Ah, gotcha. Okay, so everything's good now?
Yes, much better.
Perfect. Okay. Step 5, accommodations team will fulfill the approvals. As I explained, they'll coordinate with other vendors, with partner sites to ensure that the accommodations are completed. And then we do have step 6, which is accommodation details are delivered to the test center. So this is a dual type of communication effort. So not only are the ADA details entered in the system for sites to see on their roster, but we also send out email communication. So that way it's all detailed if there are any particulars, any shipping requests, all that communication is delivered directly to the site point of contact. And step 7 would be exam day. Okay, so we talked about the why, we talked about what the process looks like, and then this is some data as far as where the work happens. On the graph over to the left, we see 2024 versus year-to-date data for 2025. This was actually taken at the end of Q3 of last year. So you can see here that the total exams taken for high set accommodations are almost $6,000 or 6,000 exams for total exams. Readers, they contributed about 1,700 accommodations for the total exams. Private rooms fell in with about 2,200 accommodations, and then extended time was the most common accommodation type with about 6,000. Looking at this graph, you can see that accommodations are steadily increasing year to year to year. Extended time, as mentioned before, is the most common driver. Then that's followed by the private room and then our live reader. So what I want to talk about is the complexity of each of these accommodation types. So if you do have a student who has an extended time approval, I would like to go ahead and just kind of explain that looks like for the accommodations team when scheduling. So it seems pretty easy when you have an extended time approval. right, for a learner or even when scheduling. However, that's not necessarily the case because when you think of extended time, think about the standard subtest. Could be about 90 minutes, correct? And then you add extended time, so that is going to increase that time. A lot of site sessions are limited to 2 hours. So what we have to do is we want to make sure that we give the sites that courtesy and respect and ask them if a student does have extended time, are we able to modify or adjust your sessions? We don't just do it without their permission. We do need their permission. Okay, so with those types of cases, there could be delays in scheduling, and the reason why is because we're communicating to those sites, asking for permission, can we make those adjustments? And this is particularly important because there are multiple subtests for HiSET. So you may have a student who may have extended time and they are trying to schedule for all 5 tests. Okay. Let's say, for instance, a student not only has extended time, but they are now in a private room. So that's another layer of coordination that we have to work with the site on, because not every single site has a private room available. So in those situations, if a private room is not available, then we do ask, are we able to block certain seats in order to allow for the test taker to sit and take their exam? And let's say, for instance, not only does a student have extended time along with a private room, but now they have a reader. So with reader accommodations, it's best for them to be in a private room, depending again on site availability, but we also need to make sure that we have site permission. And with live readers, we do have a lead time because we do hire our readers through a separate vendor. They're not PSI hired or staff. Our readers are hired through U Exams, okay, and they are pretty expensive, okay. With hiring readers, last year our expense was about $330,000 just to our readers. So to combat that type of expense, we look for, JAWS to be an alternative. But we do know and we recognize that with JAWS, there are certain subtests that it will not read properly throughout the whole exam. For instance, math and science. There are some images, tables, and graphs that the software just is not compatible with. Okay, any questions here with this slide?
JAWS is just something that automatically sends a software that automatically reads it out.
Yes, JAWS is a text-to-speech software. Okay, we're going to go ahead and skip to the online application. So as mentioned, the request begins with the online application or the digital form. The digital form, the link is available on the highset.org website. What a test taker or an advocate can do is simply click on that digital form. I'll show a snippet of what that looks like, and then they complete the form as required. Along with the information of name, demographics, type of exam that they are going to be taking, we do ask that there are some submissions of documentation, whether that documentation is a medical letter, a 504, IEP, that is part of the process, and missing that information, not including that upload, that is going to delay the process of the request. Our HiSET accommodations are reviewed within 3 to 5 business days. Fortunately, the team is running a little faster than that, and on average, it's a 2-day business turnaround time. Okay, and here is a copy of the submission form. So these are the exact snippets from our ticketing platform. So the student or the advocate would literally just go online. They would complete the form on the website as is. Okay, so you would see that there is an email that needs to be submitted. You have your subject, candidate's first name, last name, email address, phone number. Have they registered for the exam? Okay, we want to make sure again that an account is created so we can apply the accommodations appropriately. The program. Is it HiSET Wyoming, HiSET Indiana, HiSET Massachusetts? And then we do have some disclosures in which they do have to be signed and acknowledged. So the first disclosure is in regards to our consent terms and conditions. Any submission of documentation does contain some PII or HIPAA information, medical information that's private. That information is kept confidential. We don't release that information. And also, there is a reminder to provide documentation. So you can see documents uploaded. Make sure that you do have the necessary documentation in order for us to process the complete review and possible approval. And there is a description portion, so if the test taker has any additional information, they're more than welcome to add that piece. It's particularly important to add what type of accommodations they are requesting. What types of accommodations they are requesting really need to align what is in the submitted documentation. So if they are requesting extra time, if they are requesting a reader and extra time, that information needs to be within the documentation. If it does not align, there is a possibility that their accommodation request could be denied. Not necessarily denied, but we may go back and say, you know, the information that you're requesting, we don't have valid information to support that request. So what I mean by that is the student could request a reader, but however, within the IEP or the 504 plan, it may just talk about, well, they're more successful with extra time. That's not in alignment, right, with the request and the submitted documentation. So we want to make sure that everything aligns with the paperwork. And you can see that there is a spot for them to attach their documentation and then send the request. And then once the request is sent, that does generate a ticket. And so any type of communication that we have between the test taker or the advocate, that is done through our ticketing platform. Okay, any questions?
Can the advocate be the primary contact as opposed to the student?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So HiSET accommodations. Accommodations are available for test takers with diagnosed disabilities that include but are not limited to ADHD, psychological or psychiatric disorders, learning and other cognitive disabilities, physical disorders, chronic health disabilities, intellectual disabilities, hearing and visual impairments. With certain accommodations, they do not need pre-approval. Okay, transparent overlays, scratch paper, earplugs, straight edge, handheld non-electronic magnifying device, seat, cushion, back pillows, prescription medications, service animals, medical devices, highlighter or black felt pen for essays and scratch work only. So this list is not a comprehensive list of accommodations that do not need a request. We do have a PSI pre-approved comfort aids list. So these items do sit on that form and document. And again, they do not require an accommodation request. Just recently, within the last 24 hours, we actually updated our list. And what that list now includes is language specific to medical devices, okay, that require a phone app. You may be familiar with, phone apps that have glucose monitoring, or even hearing aids require certain phone apps in order to operate. So we recently added this change on the document. So now if the phone app is required for an exam, you do not need to submit an accommodation request. This is a big deal for us and a big change for us. So what the test centers will need to understand is if the phone is solely used for that medical device, okay, they do not need an accommodation request. Okay? The phone will be monitored or brought in for check-in purposes, and the phone will need to be in airplane mode. Okay, it will need to be arm's distance away, or if a test center has a designated workstation, they can have it in maybe the right-hand corner, but it does need to be visible. Okay. Again, this is a big deal because this change does eliminate a lot of the requests from being submitted. Any questions here? Okay. So again, some of the accommodations that do require an approval, we talked about extended time, readers, a private room, large print, screen magnification, Zoom text is another software piece that's screen magnifier, a talking calculator, a reader, whether that is JAWS, text-to-speech, or a live reader, a scribe, or a keyboard entry aid, any type of additional supervised break time. So keep in mind with additional supervised break time, we do ask for that to be scheduled on site because we can monitor and we have a little more control over those breaks. And then sign language interpreted instructions for test takers who are deaf or hard of hearing. On that little sticky, it does say that most accommodations are administered in a test center. Okay, some are accommodations, such as reading out loud. They are not permitted for any type of live online proctored exams. Okay, any questions? Okay, great. Okay. Typical documentation for accommodations. We want to ensure that the test takers are submitting the correct documentation. Okay. Any type of verification from the medical authority or learning institution that renders the diagnosis must be submitted. What does that mean? Okay. We just need validation, verification that there is either a medical condition or a physical condition. We do need to validate the request. Right? That letterhead must have the test taker's name, the description of the disability or the type of limitations related to testing. Also, what is the recommended accommodation or modification? The name, title, and telephone number of the medical authority or specialist must be on the document, as well as the original signature of the medical authority or specialist. We didn't mention this, but the date is particularly important. Okay, we're not going to accept probably a 504 plan from 20 years ago. Okay, in some cases, a letter from an adult educator who is working closely with the student will be considered. Okay, again, failure to submit the required documentation will delay the approval process. So make sure that when you are submitting the request, again, all documentation must be included. Otherwise, there will be a delay. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, no,
We
no.
only do GED in our program,
Okay.
and so I'm desperately looking for other options because their process is, we haven't had luck with it. And so, we have, for instance, a 56-year-old woman who was diagnosed with dyslexia when she was in school, which is something that doesn't self-correct. But she doesn't have a current IEP, obviously. So in those cases, we were a very rural area.
The reason why I'm smiling is because that's going to kind of like intro into the next piece. It's great question.
All will be revealed.
Okay, perfect. So here we go. I'm going to hand this off to Stephanie.
Perfect. We'll see. I'm going to talk about one thing before I get into the educator letter. The educator letter is one of our most popular things to work through, but when we've been in the field, we've heard this request and question quite a bit. We want to let you know there is no systematic way to end up adding any kind of additional contacts into the accommodations file. So if the test taker is the requester, they are the person who is getting the information. There is no other way for us to add something in that maybe an adult educator or some advocate that's at the program is also getting a carbon copy on it. So we recommend as a best practice that the test taker themselves copy you in on the communications they would like to do. That actually checks a couple boxes for us because then it's their permission as the person who is adding you onto the communication. We don't have to worry about any confusion or any issues with someone sharing that kind of information. The accommodations team will work directly with the test centers to schedule the test takers with appropriate accommodation. So this communication is separate from the test taker communication. So there's a lot of different forms of communication that goes back and forth. After I talk about educator letter, I'm handing the mic back over to Beverly, who will talk more about scheduling and how her team works with it. But this has been a question that folks are really eager to understand, because normally it's part of a village who are supporting our students with accommodations. Any questions on that part before I move forward? Educator letter. So the educator letter discussion actually happened a couple years ago when we were in Nashville for COABE. Was there anyone here in the room that actually attended that same presentation? Sometimes I do have people who attended that presentation. And even though educator letters has been something that HiSET has had available since the beginning of HiSET, we discovered when we were at COABE that folks didn't really realize that they could submit an educator letter as a part of that documentation. So once we talked about that, everyone in the room got very, very excited and very, very anxious about, okay, I want to do the best thing I can for my student. I want to be able to advocate for my student. What do I say? How do I say it? How much text do I have to have? Is it like 4 or 5 pages? So Beverly was kind enough to go through the documentation and accommodations and find an example sample letter that we could come out into the field and talk to the educators about that gives you a nice template and a nice guideline. With Beverly present, I have to make sure we all promise that we're not going to write the exact same letter. But this will give you an idea of how you can craft that letter. It gives you an idea about the level of detail to include. And this actual letter was approved for an extended time accommodation. So we'll go through the letter. We'll go through some other excerpts. We do make these slides available, so we will make sure that if anybody is interested in the slides, we will share them. But we first did like a little anatomy of an educator letter. So you can see they must be submitted on official letterhead. And of course, we've kind of redacted anything we didn't really want to share. You must include your title and experience, and then indicate the type of accommodation requested. I would not have anyone get hung up on whether it's double time, time and a half. That's something that Beverly's team can work through. So you could say extended time, could be double time or time and a half, but don't pick a path. Let the accommodations team work with you to determine what that right path might be. Include any additional information that you would like to about your test taker, and of course, we always need full contact information. So I know that text was hard to read, so again, on this next slide, we've pulled out kind of like a checkbox, and I've also highlighted some specific text that we think could be very helpful. First of all, again, submit on official letterhead. Include title and experience. So in this particular example, the educator has shared, I serve as a lead instructor at the Adult Education Center, and I'm also an educational consultant. I have worked with a wide range of students ages 10 to 70 with varying goals and learning patterns, frequently with students challenged by ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, anxiety, and other challenges. So that paragraph gives us an idea of the experience that the educator in the classroom has. It tells us a little bit about who they've worked with and what they've kind of seen, and it gives the accommodations team a nice, good, solid backing as they're working through the rest of the educator letter. Indicate the accommodation requested. Application for extended time should receive full and unequivocal support. Please grant student time and a half or double time for his HiSET subtests. So again, it's okay just throw both. You're not the determiner. We'll let accommodations work with you on that thing. We did have some educators who were really concerned about, oh, I don't want to ask for the wrong thing and then delay the process. And we actually just make this point because we don't want you to worry about that. When you submit the information and you submit the documentation, that's something that's on our plate. Include any additional information. So this educator shared some additional information about the student. Is a highly analytical and detailed thinker who tends to overthink while preparing due to lack of confidence. I feel like we see that a lot in our students. Experiencing extreme test anxiety and makes it difficult to focus. Under the test's regular time, he panics and is usually unable to finish all of his sections. Has completed several practice tests and received strong scores, but often fails to answer all of his questions. Can be corrected if he is granted additional time. So really kind of lays out the steps that the educator has taken, some of the observations with data that the educator has also worked through, so it gives a nice backing. So it's not just a letter that says, Tommy needs 10 more minutes. It's a letter that talks about Tommy. It talks about Tommy's experience. It talks about your experience as an educator to say, this is why Tommy could use the extra time. It gives us some data to kind of back that up as well. And then again, you'll provide your full contact information. Additionally, Beverly was kind enough to pull some other examples of things that were included in the educator letter that might have come from additional documentation, but also can be used to help substantiate what you're writing. So previous references to IEPs. When previously enrolled in school, had an individualized education plan to support anxiety and PTSD. IEP included extra time for assessment and extra breaks as needed, took an official practice test for reading, provided double time to complete, used all time allotted, and that accommodation gave ability to score well prepared. Direct language from, again, another direct language, and this is just a subheading that you've seen on several reports. So for testing, we'll receive extra time, have directions clarified or repeated, questions restated, and tests read orally to the student, but reading subtests in a small group setting. And then an additional educator letter excerpt. As his teacher, I've had the opportunity to work with him and have observed his dedication to his education despite facing challenges. Previously has not had an IEP, is hardworking and capable student, but requires additional time to process and complete academic tasks effectively. Recent circumstances have impacted the ability to work at the same pace as his peers, particularly in high-pressure testing environments. Granting extended time would provide the necessary support to demonstrate true academic abilities without unnecessary stress or disadvantage. So after kind of seeing this, now if we come back to your example, I really do feel like this might be something that would be helpful for the student that you were talking about, where they wouldn't have the official documentation, but if a situation is a situation that warrants some additional time, I feel like this would really help you support your student. Questions about the educator letter? Yes?
Does it help you guys if they have an old IEP from high school, that we send that in also, even with the teacher's, accommodation letter?
Absolutely.
Additional information is great. It's very, very helpful. Thank you.
In these cases, more is more.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Great questions so far. Okay. Okay, as far as scheduling, as mentioned before, it's extremely important that the test taker does not self-schedule. Please, please, please reach out, contact the exam accommodations team. The phone number is here, 800-367-1565, extension 6750. There are business hours, so the exam accommodations phone number is only open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time. Okay. If for some reason, the test taker is unable to reach us, or if, we have some follow-up or callbacks, okay, we will contact the test taker or we will contact the educator. Okay. There are going to be some times where follow-up is required because site communication may be delayed. We may be waiting for a reply, but we will get back to the test taker. We understand the importance of making sure that the scheduling does happen. Accommodations will contact test taker and the test site to verify time and date, whatever works for both of them. We want to make sure that the coordination effort is pretty seamless. During this time, I do have to admit and be very transparent, there's a lot of testing volume going on right now. Okay, so please bear with us. If you are with the test site and have confirmed with the test taker, make sure to advise this on the call or in the email. The reason why that is mentioned is we have a lot of educators scheduling for their test takers. So we do want to make sure that you confirm a preferred date and time. If you are working with a different test site, I will advise that my team is going to reach out directly to that test site to confirm availability. Unfortunately, we just can't go off of hearsay. We do have to get permission from that site's contact person.
Can a site deny accommodations?
They won't necessarily deny the accommodation, they may deny the availability. Okay, yeah, the site cannot deny the accommodations that we've already approved, but again, they can deny the availability. Let's say, for instance, we are looking to book a private room, extended time, and a reader at the end of April, and they just don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the session availability. We will work with the site to determine what is the best option for the test taker. And sometimes there's back and forth communication that happens, but we will do our best to make sure that we schedule the test taker as soon as possible. Okay. Again, do not schedule any accommodations testers yourself. We have seen this multiple times, and what happens is the student misses out on that accommodation. And it's an unfortunate situation. That's why it's really, really important to schedule through the exam accommodations team. Okay. I would like to note that the accommodations team will block the account from scheduling upon the first scheduled exam. What this means is once the approval and once the scheduled exam has been booked, there's a block placed on the account. This prevents the test taker from scheduling themselves online for other subtests. So if you hear from the student, I can't schedule the rest of my exams with accommodations, there's a reason why. Okay, and we don't want them to not only stress about the tests, but also stress about having accommodations applied to their account. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Okay, so this next slide really talks about the accommodation types, whether or not they are available for CBT exams, so computer-based tests, or a PBT, a paper-based test, and then any type of additional comments and notes. I think I've talked about extended time so many different times. This is one of the most common accommodation types that we have on the team. Again, the accommodations team will contact the site if necessary, if that extended time goes beyond the sessions that are available. With the private room, the accommodations team will contact the sites to ensure that the private room is available and that we can reserve it. And the private room, let's see, readers. Okay. Again, we do need at least 9 business days in advance to hire the service provider because we do use an outside vendor for the service. Screen readers, we refer to screen readers as JAWS. So again, JAWS is a text-to-speech software. We do want to make sure that the site has the compatibility or the licensure to allow for the software to be uploaded. So there are going to be instances where a student may want to test tomorrow with JAWS. We're not going to be able to fulfill that request in such a short time frame. So we may ask that the student be scheduled further out to ensure that JAWS is actually operational and functioning. Okay, something to keep in mind again is that JAWS may or may not work properly with math and science exams. Okay, but for the reading, the writing, the social studies, it works perfectly fine. Okay, there are alternatives. So in those cases, rather than having a screen reader uploaded onto the workstation, we may hire a live reader. Because we don't want to displace, we don't want to inconvenience the test taker. We know how important these tests are. Noise reducing headphones, most sites, I skipped Scribe. So with Scribe, it applies pretty much the same way as a reader. So we want to have at least 9 business days in advance to hire that service provider. Okay. And a Scribe, I just want to make sure that it is known, a Scribe is not a reader. Okay. They're not necessarily interchangeable. So a reader is there specifically to read the content. A scribe is there to document the answers. Okay. And there are instances where the reader and scribe can be one person.
That's what I was going to ask. I have
Okay.
someone who has a test coming up with both.
Yes. And it depends on the availability of the service provider. There could be instances where the reader and scribe is one person, or they could be two separate individuals. Okay. Noise reducing headphones. This works with both CBT and PBT. We will confirm if the site does have headphones. If not, then we'll request for our shipping team to deliver that equipment to the site. And then paper and pencil exams. Obviously, it's not allowed for computer-based testing, so this is strictly PBT. And it is important for states that offer PBT by approval only. Okay. Flexibility and being open to multiple options is critical for scheduling. Many sites have limited availability for their private rooms and longer testing periods. So let's, again, just keep that in mind. Okay, any questions? Okay, and that completes our session. I do thank everybody. If you have any other questions, please feel free to speak up. That's okay.
This is just so new to our program, and I just want to expand opportunities for our students because we see this a lot. And it's heartbreaking to know that our students are coming in and we know that they're not going to be able to make it through the accommodation process for GED. So my question would be, we have we're very rural, we're very spread out. We have one testing site in the regional office of education, one that we just learned about, which is going to be potentially a 2-hour drive for some of our students that offers high set. And then at our community college, we have a testing center there that offers the GED exam, and it's their main tutoring and testing center. So my question would be, what would it cost potentially for our community college's tutoring and testing center to become a proctor for the high set?
That's a great question. Stephanie.
So it's a test center that's already established as a Pearson View Center.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you a few questions.
Sure. Hopefully I'll know the answers.
Would this be a paper test center, a computer test center, or both?
I love options for our students because we have some that are not computer literate. So
Understood.
it would be best to have both. But I don't. So we'll just say both.
Okay.
There was one
So in a situation where they would be both, it would be the test center's responsibility to make sure that they have machines that are compatible with our secure browser and how we would deliver the test over the computer. It would also be the test center's responsibility to make sure that they could meet the guidelines that are established in terms of space, parking, the ability to have certain facilities nearby. We do have a page that describes all of that, and I'll hand you my card before we leave. If you email me, I can send you the web link so you can look at the computer requirements, to look at the space and facility requirements. If you meet those requirements, then you would have to think about the program and how they would support the scheduling. So from the HiSET point of view, you're not paying HiSET for that particular service. It would be the investment that the space would have for facilities, equipment, and labor for the test center itself to be able to administer. Test centers would have two options. They could be a type of test center where they schedule and they take the payment, and HiSET invoices them for the amount of tests that they have. Or you could not deal with any of the money, and you could be a test center that is fully open to the public, searchable on the web, and that would go through HiSET's payment processing, and they would just schedule open slots that are at your test center.
That's what they currently do.
So it would be just open slots. So then they wouldn't be involved in any of the payment processing. They would have to make sure upon check-in that they would look at the check-in documentation. So they would have to work with the state's ID policies, because that's and every state can be different. HiSET, our website is set up very nicely. So you click the state you're in, and you'll get a listing of our policies. Each page has a dedicated state page. So in terms of investment in money, it's really on the facility side.
And we're very lucky, we've got a very supportive tutoring and testing center that's really supportive of our students and a great IT department, so hopefully we can marry those two things.
Yeah. Great questions.
And the paper-based test, then I'm assuming that's once you kind of vet the tutoring and testing center, then they're just able to administer the paper-based test?
So it depends on how if the testing center comes in and says we'd like to be able to offer paper and computer, let me just clarify, what state are you in?
Illinois.
Okay, Illinois, yes, you also have paper available. Yeah, I was just there.
We're central Illinois, so it's probably blew right through us.
I was at the conference. I was at the IACEA. Yeah,
Yeah, you got people.
yeah. We would have to get approval from the state for you to become a testing center, but state approvals are usually very easy to do. And if they're already an established testing center, testing for high school equivalency, I feel like that would be pretty easy. Yes?
So I already subjected one of you to these questions yesterday, but sorry.
No, never apologize. We are here for this purpose.
Is there any intention to have it become a more streamlined online process without that phone call portion? Because that phone call portion is where it breaks down for us in our system every single time.
I'm going to give you back to the expert.
So unfortunately, no. However, there are cases where if you are trying to schedule multiple test takers, I would say 3 or more with, various subtests, I would email EA alerts at psionline.com. EA alerts goes directly to the exam accommodations team. They do work it as a queue, so I want everybody to keep that in mind. So, but if you are able to include your tester's information, their name, which exam they are looking to test, and book their preferred date, times, and sites, that's super helpful. We can always look up what their approvals are, and then we will contact you for scheduling. If you can also include the best time to reach you, we can contact you directly so you don't have to call customer service yourself.
Can you say that email one more time?
Absolutely. It's EA alerts with an S at psionline.com. Especially now because testing volume is super high. Unfortunately, our team is busy with not only HiSET but other stakeholder accounts. So it may be hard to get through, and especially if they're working with other educators to schedule multiple test takers, you may be on hold for a little bit, and we don't want to inconvenience you. So definitely email EAalerts at psionline.com. Okay, and our standard turnaround is about 24 to 48 business hours. Okay, absolutely.
I had one situation this year where I was contacted for permission for scheduling, gave the permission, student scheduled, it never appeared on my schedule.
Oh
And
no.
then we essentially got a new email from HiSET that said the student has requested new dates, and the student had not requested new dates.
Oh no. Okay, that could just be an oversight.
Okay.
I would definitely like to investigate that. So if you can supply me with all the candidate information, the date that it occurred, that'd be great. So thank you, Lindsay. Hi.
Are there, so on the GED website, obviously our program is lucky enough to be able to have purchase practice tests. So on the HiSET side, I'm guessing there are online practice tests that we can, because I'm not sure how the two tests align well. So I don't know if, if we feel like a student is really ready to take that GED test, can we pop them over to the HiSET and have them take a HiSET practice?
The short answer is yes, because the high school equivalency standards are the same no matter what flavor. Whether you're Coke or Pepsi, they're going to be the same in that space. And we actually also usually tell folks, even if they're GED only, to take advantage of some of our free practice tests. So for HiSET practice tests, we have free practice tests that are always available online. We just released FTP 9, which is the newest one that came out right before COABE. FTP 8 was released released in 2024, and those are half-length practice tests that they can take. If you have students that really need to understand the look and feel of our computer-based tests, on our website there are computer-based practice tests. It's only one form and only one version, so you can take it multiple times, but it's really on there for you to get the look, the feel, for them to feel comfortable with the navigation, and all 5 tests are available there. Because just clarification point for you, since you're mostly GED, we have 5 instead of 4 because we separate reading and writing, and the writing does still have a full essay. So we also have official practice tests. So then we have paid practice tests, which anybody can order. They're different versions. And then official practice tests that only adult education facilities or the state can order. And we do have a full-length practice test for official practice tests, which is OPT 12, and then the rest of the versions are half-length. We just recently started doing full-length practice tests because it more closely simulates what the student is going through, but we are going to go on a rotating schedule of how we're releasing practice tests. Full-length, half-length, full-length, half-length, because we also got some feedback from the field that a lot of educators are pressed for time. And so the half length is very easy to fit into their already established lesson plan. Those things are available to you in paper, but we also have Essential Education as our practice test testing partner. So OPTs, official practice tests, can be purchased for computer only, directly with Essential Education. Yeah. So paper tests, you can go on the HiSET store, and the full length are 15 per test, and the paper or the half length are 10. For Essential Education, I believe they are half length is $2.50 per test, and the full length is $5. And very truly, we realize people who buy paper copies will photocopy them.
No.
We're not gonna gloss over the elephant in the room. We'll just say, hey, how you doing?
Well, and the paper tests, are there multiple?
Yes, there are multiple versions. You can go onto our HiSET store, and you can see which versions we have available. The most recent ones will be the 12s. Anything else we can answer for you? Yes.
Is there a policy about giving accommodations before they take any tests? Or can they take some tests and then give accommodations for the one they are most concerned with? I've had a problem with that, but it's been a few years, so I don't want to.
That's a great question. That's a great question. If the student does not require accommodations for 3 out of the 5 tests, that's perfectly fine. If they only need it applied to the one exam, then they do need to have the approved accommodations. So submit it. They can submit it at any time during that whole process. My suggestion is to get the submission in as soon as possible. Because what's going to happen is we're going to apply it across all of the subtests, whether or not the test taker needs it. Okay. Great question. Any others?
If a student gets read aloud, how does that work with the reading test? I come from K-12 where you can't read aloud a passage to a student. Will the read aloud person read the passage and the questions, or just the questions?
Just to clarify, when you mention read aloud, is that them reading to themselves, reading aloud, or reading aloud with a reader?
Reading with a reader.
I see. So the reader is there to read all exam content.
Okay.
The passages, the questions. If the test taker needs the reader to repeat the question, they're absolutely there for that need.
Okay, so there's no concern that it's a listening test at that point and not a reading test.
I'm sorry. You.
That's why we don't do it in K-12,
Ah.
because the student then is just listening. You're not really testing their reading knowledge, you're testing their listening.
They're listening. Great question. So with the reader, I can't answer that question, honestly. That's kind of difficult because I think it just depends on the student. Like, they should be reading along with the reader. At that point, I believe that might be just up to the student's discretion to say, you know, like, can I read this myself and take it upon themselves, you know, and take that accountability on them. Regina?
Oh, sure. Sorry. I handle accommodations for our English language assessment. We had this question come up. And so in some cases, if the accommodation is something that is typical for that student, where even though it is being read to them and you would think it's, okay, then they're just evaluating the listening, but if they have no other means of, if it's typical for them, they don't read, they have to listen to it, then it's not looked at in the same way as you're evaluating their, you know, listening as opposed to reading, because I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, but it is their way of interpreting the information, and so it's not regarded as they're being evaluated for listening as opposed to reading, because they don't have the option, if they're needing that accommodation, to acquire that information any other way.
We just had a teacher that was very concerned that one of her students was going to pass the reading if they had a reader, and that student cannot read at all. Oh, but he has no phonics skills. Now, if someone reads to him, he can kind of repeat and tell you what's going on. His comprehension is sort of there, but he
that's different,
can't read the words.
That's different, yeah.
We didn't know what that would look like to an employer.
In our accommodation, it's for visually impaired, so they're not able to read without somebody reading to them. But in this case, it's evaluated.
Sorry.
No, that's a new one for me.
I really just think in some of these cases, we cannot generalize what might be appropriate until we would know a little more about the particular situation. Because there might be a very valid reason why someone would be able to have a reader for a reading accommodation. But it would be impossible for Beverly and I to make any generalizations, because I am personally not a specialist in accommodations, and I think that we rely on some folks with some expertise and knowledge in specifically that field. So it would have to go through the approval process and see what would be appropriate.
Thank you. Great question.
We all kind of live in that little world, right? Everybody's had like a little different space of education. So we do have a lot of people who move into adult education that came from K-12 education. So it's not an unexpected question. It's just one that has so many different layers that it's impossible to generalize. Loving this small but mighty group with great questions. I have not seen any additional questions pop up online for us, so I think we're in good shape. All right, so I passed out my cards in the room like candy. So if you have any follow-up questions or would like a copy of our presentation, please feel free to reach out to me directly. If I need to pass something off to Beverly, I'm always happy to do so, because we work as a very close and cohesive team. We appreciate everything that you do for your students and everything that you do to support their next steps, and we are happy that you came here to learn with us today. So have a great rest of the conference. Yeah, yes.
Hi, everyone. Just before you leave.
So if any of you work with ELLs or have a specific ESL student population, we are here working with the same company as HiSET. We have an English language assessment that specifically focuses on students' knowledge of English in the workplace, and we're offering a free pilot program, and we're looking for organizations who might be interested in joining that pilot program. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please come speak with us. We're at the HiSET booth, and we also have some information here today. So that's an English language assessment that focuses specifically on workplace English skills. No, overall workplace skills. As opposed to academic English. Mhm.